Accountability is back. I quote Secretary Pete Hegseth. That was our Secretary of Defense on the record just a couple of months ago. Now the debate among national security professionals is over whether the Secretary was just incompetent or whether he was drunk. That's how low this has gone, and those are serious debates happening among national security professionals today.
It's Ken Harbaugh with the Midas Touch Network. As many occasions as I have had to be outraged by what the Trump administration is doing, this week they outdid themselves. In an unsecured chat group, senior administration officials, including the Secretary of Defense and the Director of National Intelligence, discussed classified war plans, all while an uncleared reporter from The Atlantic was observing, having been invited to the chat apparently accidentally by Trump's national security advisor. I knew you'd want to hear from Kris Goldsmith about this one. He's everyone's favorite here on the Ken Harbaugh Show, and lucky for me, he just started his own podcast, so there's less of a threat of him taking over this one. I'll let him tell you about that, and the link is in the notes below. But most of all, listen to what he has to say about how enraging it is to anyone who has served this country, to anyone whose life has depended on the seriousness of those in positions of power, when unserious fools like Pete Hegseth play fast and loose with the lives of those in their charge. By the way, that clip at the top is of Seth Moulton, a U.S. Marine now serving in Congress, laying out just how low this has gone. He'll be on the show next week to talk about the Trump administration's total inability to maintain our national defense. So if you have questions you'd like me to ask the congressman, leave them in our Substack or Patreon chats. It's going to be another epic show. But first, Kris Goldsmith. This one's coming to you in 2 installments. Here's part 1.
They discussed battle plans ahead of strikes. Not only should all of them resign in disgrace, they should be prosecuted.
Welcome to the Ken Harbaugh Show. We've got Kris Goldsmith back. He's the founder and president of Task Force Butler, which identifies, tracks, and holds accountable extremists and extremist organizations across the country. Kris, you've been on a tear lately. Bring us up to speed. You got some news to share.
Yeah, so I just launched a brand new podcast. It's called the Find Out Podcast. It is created with me and another 5 guys who only recently met. The 6 of us met through White Guys for Harris. And we've just been in a group chat kind of talking shit for a few months. And one of them, Zach, proposed to us a couple months ago, just says like, hey, I've got an idea. How about we do a podcast? He had one of his own and was like, we should give this a try and see how it goes. And the launch was, I'll be totally honest. I don't like podcasts. I don't listen to them. I appreciate the people who are listening to me right now, but I like don't know a whole lot about podcasts. And I was going into this kind of just to see if I wanted to be a host, if this was something that, I could get into, because people have been, since I'm on this show all the time, telling me, hey, you should do your own show. So I did it as kind of an experiment, and it ended up being wildly successful. We launched last week. We dropped the episode on Tuesday. We had technical bugs. It didn't go on Spotify for a few hours. We managed to get to number 29 in top US shows on Apple Podcasts within 3 days. And we held that position for, I think, 24 hours. That was ahead of Tucker Carlson, Charlie Kirk, Steve Bannon, Tim Pool, Candace Owens, you name the right-wing disinformation factories. These, by the way, they're all millionaires who I just talked about, all millionaires who have professional staff, who have professional studios. I filmed the first episode in my freezing cold, unfinished basement, and we beat them out in the charts right out of the gate. So this week, we dropped an episode about what it means to be a man in America today. Conservatives shouldn't even call them conservatives, but the right wing has redefined masculinity and made it toxic. And I think that not just the Democratic Party, but people of decency need to start kind of reclaiming masculinity and showing that it is not masculinity is not a synonym for violent asshole, right? So I am super fucking excited, way more excited than I expected to be. And if people want to check us out, just look for the Find Out podcast anywhere that you listen to podcasts.
This might be a good moment to cue the Valor Media trailer, but the reason I wanted to talk to you so badly is because this is a sign that, as absent as our voices were in this ecosystem, it wasn't because there was a lack of demand. It was a lack of attention that we were paying to this audience that has gravitated to so many of the people you just mentioned, Tim Pool and Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan, right? But it turns out they'll be receptive to a more positive message if we just deliver it, if we just go into those spaces and talk in an authentic way about masculinity, about things they actually care about. So
yeah,
it is incredibly heartening.
Again, this was an experiment for all of us. We had no idea that we were going to get on the charts, let alone be in the top 30. And I think that this is the perfect test case. Like, this should be in the Valor pitch deck because people want this, and we just didn't know, right? Like, we just simply didn't understand that. What's the baseball movie? If you build it, they will come. Like, I guess the part of the problem is I didn't consider myself a creator or an influencer until very recently. I started getting into TikTok, and really because of the Harris campaign. And I think that the left in this country has simply just not had enough people willing to. I shouldn't blame creators. It's not that people aren't willing to experiment. We on the left have had a disadvantage in that we don't have corporate sponsors the way that the right does, right? The reason that Charlie Kirk is so popular is not because he figured something out that was genius. It's not because he's very smart. His whole shtick was just being everywhere all at once. And the only reason he was able to do that when he was young is because, I don't know whether it was the Koch brothers specifically, but it was those types of angel investors who made him have a viable business where he could pay people to, and we're not doing this, but the right wing, they pay people to sit online all day, consume their content, commenting on it and all that stuff, right? So we're playing catch up. We're doing it without the benefit of corporate sponsors, but the demand that we've seen and the response that we've gotten from the audience is extremely encouraging. And now, I mean, one of our podcast hosts just keeps talking about quitting his job. I don't think anyone's ready for that yet. But this is a viable business.
Hey, it's Ken Harbaugh. Check out the new trailer for Valor Media Network. Together, we can take on Joe Rogan and his Manosphere Bros and win. Click the link below to subscribe to Valor Media Network and share it with a friend. Thanks, Midas Mighty. We got this.
There's not enough men like me who do whatever they want.
Are you sick of it yet?
Those people need to be, when we take power, they need to be given the death penalty.
The anger.
I live like a capitalist every single day, Shank. I live as a capitalist.
The hate.
And we have a system of checks and balances. That's a good one. That's really funny. We do?
The idea that to be a man, you have to be a bully.
Fuck you!
We should be better than this.
Females don't have independent thought. They don't come up with anything.
Our kids deserve better than this.
It's like women want equal rights when it's convenient, but then they still want the door open for them.
So help us change it. Subscribe to Valor Media Network, where you can find shows on sports, men's health, and patriotism without the resentment and division.
True strength is about discipline, resilience, and service.
If you've wondered where all the positive role models are, especially for young men, check out Navy SEAL Dan Barkov and Commander Bobby Jones as they share stories of service and sacrifice.
Being good at being a man is about what you do for others and not what you do for yourself.
Listen to Jason Tander and co-hosts Ravi Gupta and Adisu Demisi give you the inside track on the politics of sports.
I just want to take back what I said about the Bills. No, because in all honesty, your team seems to have gotten the vaccination thing right. Okay. My team seems to be struggling with it.
These shows and many more from Valor Media Network prove that you don't have to be an asshole to connect with young men today. Subscribe to Valor Media Network today. Well, that pattern repeats itself again and again and again on the right of investment in individual influencers / creators. I think the most frustrating case in point to me, because we're sort of peers of this person, is Pete Hegseth. Not a podcaster, but certainly an influencer, a Fox News host. No real innate talent when it comes to policy or leadership. He ran multiple veterans organizations into the ground, but he had those backers. He's had those investors. And yesterday, he just about blows up the Defense Department, right? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the idea that the Secretary of Defense, the DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, and a whole and Vice President J.D. Vance, who remember was a veteran. The idea that they hopped into a Signal chat and just straight up invited a journalist in to discuss battle plans. And I think that Trump's administration is getting away at, well, specifically Hegseth is like, oh, there weren't war plans because Congress declares war, right? They're trying to nuance this to death. They discussed battle plans ahead of strikes. Not only should all of them resign in disgrace, they should be prosecuted. Now, I don't expect Pam Bondi to grow a conscience and to start prosecuting criminals associated with the Trump administration, because then we wouldn't have a government and she would probably lose her job anyway. But I think that Democrats today need to start getting specific in what they plan to do if we take back the White House in 4 years. And it should be, we shouldn't simplify things like Donald Trump does and just reduce it to lock them up, right? That chant, we should not be doing that. And I know that was popular last year at some Kamala rallies. But we should be specific in saying this is the law that was broken, the classified sharing, the reckless endangerment of classified information. That is such, they should, if we had done this, we would have been court-martialed. We'd be in jail,
100%.
right? And just because these are Trump's morons doesn't mean that we should normalize this, or that Democrats should be only demanding resignations. They should be talking about how prosecutions are not happening now because we have a fundamentally corrupt administration in Trump and Musk. But when we get back into power, when speaking for the Democrats, when Democrats get back into power, they aren't going to do the Joe Biden, Merrick Garland, we're just going to lay back and see what happens thing. We need to aggressively prosecute people who have betrayed this country and committed felonies out in the open. And we need to prosecute them quickly. We can't sit and wait around for 3.5 years and decide, we'll appoint a special counsel. No, this needs to be like a campaign promise.
That was part 1 of my interview with Kris Goldsmith. Check out part 2 tomorrow, where Kris and I get into the particulars of how we need to hold Pete Hegseth and his band of incompetents accountable. See you then.